We got a beautiful day. We're in a beautiful part of the world, and you're all inside here in a windowless room to talk about something that's probably very near and dear to you. Could I see a show of hands for those who are immediately affected by TBI, whether it's themselves or a family member? And then how many folks are affected in the sense that you are in the medical field, in the therapeutic field? Okay, so it's little, maybe 60-40 kind of. And how many of you are pure caregivers, mother, father, sister, spouse, sibling? Okay, great, thank you. It's always helpful to know where to direct my remarks. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the story and what happened to Bob and I. It was 7 years ago, which is so incredible for me to realize that much time has passed. It's well documented in our book, and it's not going to help you to understand how big the bomb was and how many days he was in a coma. I think what's important when I come to a group such as this, and I try to do as many of these kinds of talks to my inside baseball team as I think of you all, is to really get right to the meat of the matter, the stuff that other people don't necessarily understand, or when they look at your husband post-injury or accident and say that phrase that we've all grown to hate, well, he looks great. And you realize then that that person doesn't have the key to the club. They don't know how to get in the door. And you smile politely and you say thank you. And behind that smile are so many other things and so many other thoughts. Bob really shouldn't be alive. His injuries were critical. I was bracing certainly to not have him be in any kind of capacity where he could speak or go back to work or really lead any kind of a productive life. And he is truly, truly a miracle person. I don't know how he survived what he did, but I know how I survived. And I refer to them as the 4 legs of the stool, the 4 F's on that stool. And I think for all of you in the room, you'll understand when I say that for me they were family and friends and faith and funny, because I don't know how you get through anything without a sense of humor. And I saw some of those people in the hospital in the acute care situation who didn't so much have a sense of humor, and I felt for them, because I think if you can't laugh at your husband and call him the half-head or make jokes when he screws the word up and refers to the man coming to fix the phone as the Viagra man instead of the Verizon man, if you just simply can't laugh at all that stuff, then you're really not going to get very far in life. And boy, when he threw the Viagra thing out, I said, no way, baby, not this caregiver. I have my hands full with 4 kids, and the last thing I need is you on Viagra with a head injury. It's not going to help anyone. But laughter and the ability to find other like folk who were travelers on this road were really important parts of the equation. So what did I learn? Well, I learned so many things, as you all did. I learned that those 3 letters, TBI, I had no idea what they meant before Bob received his head injury. The book actually grew out of something that Bob's neurosurgeon said in the acute care military hospital down in Bethesda, which was somebody needs to write a book about this and these kinds of injuries, because there really aren't a lot of books out there. And nobody out there, and this was 6 years ago, has any idea that these men and women are cycling through these hospitals in these numbers coming back from the wars. And that really stuck with me. It stayed with me because if there was an opportunity in this very bizarre world where something horrible can happen and you get your sort of 15 minutes of fame, and if we had a chance and a shot at using our voice and our story to educate other people about this journey, then that seemed really important. Bob was someone who had been in everybody's living rooms, and as strange as that was for us to feel, because he was just my husband and my kid's father, we understood that in that moment where the intersection of the bad thing happened to the person that people felt like they knew, there was a chance to either sit down, as so many people in the public eye have done with these injuries, because they're stigmatized, because they connote unattractive things, mental retardation, whatever people's thoughts are about what a head injury means. Or you could stand up and you could use your story to connect you with so many other people. Because ultimately, in the end, everybody will meet some form of loss, some form of grief, some place where we fell short of where we wanted to be. the moment when we realize that we don't have our hands on the script at all in this life, and we can't press rewind. As many times as I wanted to do that in my head, as I replayed over and over again what that scene must have looked like with Bob standing up in the tank and the bomb exploding and all of the rest of it happening. I think to get us out of acute care and move us to rehab for the purposes of this conversation, that's really where the rubber met the road for me. And I remember one of my most stressful decisions ever was where to take him next when he recovered enough and left Bethesda Naval Hospital, and it was time for him to go on to the next phase. At the time, he was unable to do 3 hours or 2 hours of therapy even. He was out of the acute care stage, but still unable to follow commands. And I was toggling between acute care nursing homes and trying to learn as much as I could about rehabilitation hospitals. And the military was very determined to keep Bob within the VA system because he had stayed within the system to date. And it just was a nice sort of part of the package for them to kind of keep him in their continuum of care. But what they were talking about was Tampa, Florida, and where we live is Westchester, New York. I realized really early on, even though no one told me this, and boy do I wish that they had, that families heal together. That the smartest thing I could ever do was bring him back here to the New York area, where his little girls, who were 5 at the time that he was injured, his twins, my twins too actually, could sit on his lap and talk to him and tickle him and tell him stories and work with him on relearning his words. And it seems like such a simple thing now, but I remember feeling so stressed because they had said to me, people who have been injured with blast injuries should be healing together. You don't want him somewhere where someone's had choked on a piece of, I'll never forget this, choked on a piece of steak at the 21 Club, and he's sitting around in a support group with a bunch of people who weren't in the war. And I said, but he really wasn't in the war. He is a journalist, and he's not a soldier. And they said, but he was injured by a blast, and he should be with like-minded people. Well, lo and behold, as a spouse of someone, the last thing you want to do is make the decision and make the wrong decision. And I think before we went to the rehabilitation hospital, and I kept hearing these magical words, neuropsychologist and cognitive therapy. And I thought, well, this is like the Wizard of Oz. These people have magic slippers, and we're going to get him there, and he's going to just be, dancing down the yellow brick road, and everything's going to flood back because these are really big words and they sound really important. And as I went into the sessions with him, I realized that cognitive therapy, this sort of holy grail for me, was a couple of things, but it was mostly hard work, dedication, and really wonderful people who understood how to individualize treatment and understood, because they were psychologists, the nature of who they were sitting in front of and how to best motivate them. That there was no magic bullet that they were going to inject into Bob's veins and it was going to begin to regrow all of his neurons and he would get all this back. And Bob describes the injury as basically a bomb goes off in your brain, and your brain is your office with all of your files in it. And some of those files, blow out of the window and whistle down to the street outside. And so in the work of rehabilitation, two things happen. There's the magic part of just the amazing regenerative qualities of our brain and the neuron growth and the ability for those neurons to knit themselves back together, sometimes in very strange and strangled ways and very, very slowly. But those are the papers that fly back up off the street and in through the window and put themselves in the filing cabinet. But for most of those pages that have been blown, those files that are all outside on Highway 35, you have to walk down those stairs and go physically pick those files up and put them back upstairs in those filing cabinets in the right order. And that is the hard, hard work of rehab. One of the things that I say to folks, especially in the care end of this, in the medical end of things. I do a lot of speaking to nursing groups and therapist groups, and I'm so honored to do that because I think more than any group, I think it's oftentimes the people who are with the patients 24/7 who need to be reminded of how incredible they are and how much we appreciate what it is you do, because you see us at our worst. You see us grumpy, you see us grieving, you see us cheated and angry, and oftentimes you're just that really easy target that we get to look at and say, you know, I'm going to take it out on her. And I have never met a more incredible group of people in my life than the people in the 3 separate hospitals that treated Bob in the areas of nursing and therapy, and just walking in every day with the same basket of problems the rest of us have, bills that need to be paid, teenagers who roll their eyes, you know, all kinds of issues. And yet checking those problems at the door and walking in to sit down and deal with my husband. But not just my husband, me too. And I will never, ever, ever forget walking in the rehab hospital when Bob was inpatient and feeling my, you know, shoulders down around protecting my heart, around my rib cage somewhere, exhausted, 4 children at home, getting them out the door in the morning, driving into New York to see Bob. And I remember the physical therapist saying to me, Mrs. Woodruff, come here. And I thought, oh my goodness, what has he done? You know, I'm in trouble. And she looked at me and she said, when was the last time anyone asked you how you are? And that was a whole box of Kleenex later, I can tell you that. And it was that ability to not just focus on Bob, but to encompass me in that circle of care. Because of course, as we all know, the analogy's been as beaten to death as it's a marathon, not a sprint, is beaten to death, right? But the analogy of the caregiver putting the oxygen on herself first before she turns it on the other person. And that's what they were doing for me that day and continue to do. One of the things that I say when I speak to therapists or I speak at nursing schools is don't judge. Do not judge that family coming in, because we are all completely different. The dynamics between us, the relationships between us, the ability or the need for a spouse to protect the dignity of that injured spouse. On one of the very first days that Bob was going through and beginning his cognitive therapy, and I remember there was his occupational therapy, which was, as many of you know, there was the store with the plastic fruit, and then over here in this corner is the bedroom with, you know, the bed to be made and the clothes to be put on. And then there's the kitchen. And that's where some hope came into me when I first took the tour. I thought, we can teach him to cook and do dishes, to make beds. I can see the upside of this head injury thing right here. And I can tell him that all along he did these things. He just somehow must have forgotten. In fact, he did the shopping too, God damn it. But it didn't work that way, sadly. I remember one day coming in and seeing him making, like he was sort of said, they had me make teriyaki chicken or something. He said, I don't make teriyaki chicken at home, but I don't know why I'm making it here. And I sat down with him after he'd gone to the store to get the fruits and the vegetables, and he was holding a plastic head of lettuce, which is like a rubber head of lettuce that my girls had at home when they would play store. And he was staring at it, and I was sitting with him, going through this sort of first week of therapy, and he could not come up with the word lettuce. And he looked at it, and he was trying so hard, and he said salad, like he had all of the other, I don't have to tell you guys, right? Amazing things come out, and you can see how the brain is organized, kind of like Jeopardy a little bit sometimes when they're searching for answers. But what he was doing is, 50% of his brain was trying to come up with the word lettuce. The other 50% was looking at me, and it was saying, oh my God, I'm letting her down. I'm like a child. I'm like a 4-year-old right now. I can't come up with the words, and look at her face. And now I have to kind of smile for her, and I have to make her feel like I can do this, like we will be okay. And 50% of that energy was being spent on showing me that he was still this vital, virile partner who loved me so much. And I never went back. And I said, I'm not going to do this. I am going to back out of here. And this is going to be his job. This is his job. His job is to go work with his coworkers for all those hours of the day that he has rehab. And the worst thing I can do is sit there and, because in my head, as he was looking at me and saying those things in the little imaginary bubble, I'm thinking, oh my God, lettuce, L-E-T-T. You eat it all the time. It comes in other colors. Are you ever going to know lettuce? We're going to be really, really good at charades, but we're going to stink at cocktail parties. And I thought, this is the most unhealthy thing I can ever do. But I felt when I decided that I would back out of this process, that I had to explain myself. They would think I was a horrible wife. Oh my gosh, his wife doesn't even show up at therapy. She didn't even come. Shows you how much she cares. And so I found myself explaining and feeling sheepish and having to sort of say, this is why I'm doing this. And of course they all understood it. But I wish somebody had said to me at the outset, this is different for everyone. Now, I've been in rehab hospitals around this country where it's been a child and someone maybe under the age of 18 or over the age of 18, and that mother is there for every step of the way. And that's probably a choice that I would make had it been my child who had gone through a head injury. So each choice, each piece of the puzzle, each way that we all fit together in the different dynamics of families are something that we all understand. But sometimes we're not given the validation for that to be okay. And so I feel that it's important to remember that we all come with our own little set of idiosyncrasies and systems and relationships. I also speak a lot to groups who are inside the beltway, as we say, about what happens to the caregiver in the after part. So I felt like that Red Cross lifeguard who got Bob to safety, who was able through just sheer adrenaline and force of will to swim him to the other side of the shore. And then I fell apart. And that's the other thing that I think we don't do enough of a good job at in this country, is the caregiver burnout part. The post-traumatic stress of the caregiver. Who here doesn't jump 2 feet in the air when the phone rings anytime after about 9:30 at night? I don't know if that ever goes away, but I think sometimes my first thought is, what's happened? What's wrong? And yet the caregiver has to just keep pushing through, keep swimming, keep moving, and keep all those balls in the air. And when the caregiver is somebody who works and is maybe raising children and has so many other demands on that person, their shoulders begin to sink lower and lower and lower. I speak really honestly about mental health because situational depression was another term that I really hadn't heard before, or if I had, I hadn't focused on what it meant. And it was actually my, at the time, 75-year-old mother who said to me, Lee, you need to get body armor. You need body armor. You're in a fight and you're in a journey and you need to go talk to somebody to unburden yourself. And maybe you need medication, and that's okay too. And I was one of those people who felt like I can do this myself. I can pull myself up by my bootstraps. If I have to take medication, that means that I've failed somewhere. And I've always been a happy person. I've always been a glass half full person. What's wrong with me now? Why can't I sort of rise above this? Well, we all have things that capsize us. Loss of a family, disease, disability, any of those things, divorce. They're all situations that are bigger than us. They create a situation where sometimes we feel like we can't climb out of the hole. And I think that as a country, we're doing a much better job of putting that in the general consciousness, that mental health and mental illness is an illness. It's not a failing or a weakness. But I think there needs to be a lot more conversation around the supporting members of the cast, especially when someone has an injury like a TBI, which is such a long-term injury and has such a lasting and ripple effect on everyone. There were a lot of little things that I learned that I'm sure you've learned as well, little things people say and do when they think that they're trying to be helpful. But you learn very quickly who your close group is, and you learn that 2 months down the road when the frozen lasagnas are all gone from the freezer and the cars have all left the driveway, you understand that sort of sense of crashing. But when people say to me, what can I do and what do I say? And I actually wrote about that in the second book, Perfectly Imperfect, at the end. Some of the things that people think are so helpful, what can I do? Things happen for a reason. God doesn't give you more than you can handle. He or she's in a better place. Some of those very trite things, after about 6 months, you really have to have, the control of Jesus to not go Rambo on some of these people and just kind of hold back. And I found that I did an interview for CBS that aired this week with a couple of the parents from the Newtown shootings. And we got into a conversation off camera about just sort of black humor and how it really saves you. And they said, we have these like horrible jokes that if anybody sort of on the outside of this heard, like if one more quilt arrives with the pink and white crocheted thing, or one, and they said no one would ever understand this. And I said, no, I get it. You have these sort of sick gallows humor came about for a reason. When you can laugh at that thing that has its chokehold over you, that thing that scares you, that whistling across the graveyard, when you can laugh at it, you take some of its power away from you. And I think in some of those moments, nowhere but a group of families or people who work in the area of traumatic brain injury is it, evident where you can make some of those sort of jokes and people laugh and smile without having to look around and see if it was politically correct to laugh at the joke. Bob continued to heal in really incredible ways, and his issues were really language and certainly cognition, and still, he still will tell you he has mild aphasia, and names are a huge issue for him because they don't have a synonym. He is more sleep will always be, I'm sure, critical forever. But he was the guy that could go for a couple hours sleep a night when he was in a war zone or in a strange place and filed the story, and just get up and go for days on a brain battery pack. And that, of course, is not happens anymore. A good at least 6 hours is what he needs to be able to function, and everything begins to degrade, of course, when he doesn't get that. I think one of my big concerns for society now is that we all feel the patriotic sense of duty to help and serve our veterans with brain injuries when they come home, but nobody really understands what that means. I'll be there at the airport with the flag waving, but I don't really know if I can offer him a job because, he jumps when the telephone book falls on the floor, or he doesn't always appear to be listening, or whatever that may be. And we have a very long way to go in terms of educating the public about what that means, because for so many of the families I've met, lives are being led and lived in really fulfilling ways. I think one of the most interesting things to me, and one of the things that I'm really passionate about, especially in this field and this industry, is the concept of hope, and how we offer hope to families and to patients. I'll never forget the 9 or so white coats at Bethesda Military Hospital when we came back from Germany, all lined up around me, all kind of pretty much telling me what he wasn't going to be able to do in so many words, and using medical terminology that was way over my pay grade. Left temporal lobe. Okay, I get it. My temple's here. But I was sitting at the chair saying to myself, wait a second, hold on. I'm still trying to process the fact that my husband got hit by a bomb. I don't understand anything you're all talking about. I'm still absorbing this news, and yet you're throwing all this medical speak at me and you're scaring me. And I think at that very moment, it's the same thing as someone taking a giant mallet out and slamming you into the ground like those Bugs Bunny cartoons before you've even been able to sort of get your sea legs. So what do? My doctor friends say to me. We can't give families false hope, because if something goes wrong or they don't recover, and certainly with a brain injury, none of us know. There are no statistics, there are no percentages we can give people. So what do you do when you don't know? And I think my answer is a couple-fold. Number one, I say to my doctor friends, there are ways to parse hope in lots of different ways. You do not have to promise someone's going to stand up and kick out the crutches and walk again. But you can find hope in a terminal situation. There is hope in wanting mother in hospice to be able to have a wonderful death, to be able to have all of her family and the people around her love her. So hope isn't this, Southern Baptist, heal thyself. Hope comes in so many different ways. Two things also happen when the bad thing happens. The first is your expectations change. So whereas before, if I expected my husband to be able to stand up and deliver an hour news broadcast without any notes, just using his photographic memory, my new scale for Bob was that he could finish a sentence without stumbling over it. And that was okay because all of these things had happened. And so my whole world had telescoped. And you do that sort of deal with God thing, like if he'll only wake up, I'll do this. So you go through the bargaining phase, and then you go through the grieving phase, and then you just go through the hope phase. And you make your own sort of sense of what your expectations and scale are. The scale changes. The human brain does that. It's because we're adaptable creatures. The other thing that happens as time goes by is we begin to understand what the reality is. We don't need that big Bugs Bunny mallet to tell us that at the very beginning, because A, a lot of times they're wrong. B, our definition of a miracle might be different than theirs. And C, we're going to figure it out. If mom's chemo isn't working after 3 months, we're going to know that. It's going to gradually begin to invade our every pore because our brains allow us to let information in the degree to which we're ready to hear it. So if dad's stroke means he'll never talk again, we're going to begin to accept that. But each of us, again, like those couples in rehab, some who want to be right there for every move and other ones who decide that's not right, we're all individuals on that road. So what do you do? What do you do when you're a doctor? I say to my doctor friends, you do what the nurses do. You tell us the stories. Because the stories are the things that connect us. The stories don't promise. The stories don't say 80% he'll be back at work. The stories say, hey, there was this guy that came in here and he was completely locked in. And he was sad and not talking, and we were certain that he was going to have to go to a nursing home. And guess what he's doing now? He defied all of our expectations. And it was those stories in very small ways that I would hear in the various facilities that we moved through that would give me the hope that I needed. Not the promise, but the hope that I needed in very small ways. And so I think that by sharing stories within the brain injury field and group and among all of us, we're able to empower ourselves to understand that every outcome is different and everybody's individual. But the stories out there are the things that can kind of keep us going. It's just like Siobhan's mother, Gail, the beautiful African-American boy who is very severely injured with a TBI. She wears his picture on her t-shirt and says, you know what? The story of Bob getting better, why can't that story be Siobhan someday? Because if you beat that hope out of the caregiver, if you take any of that away from me, well then how the heck am I supposed to get up every day and put my feet on the floor and pack lunch for those 4 kids and get them off to school and turn around and get him to rehab? What's left for me if I can't hope? And what does it hurt you if you leave me with some hope? Why can't I be the person who believes that my loved one at some point in time could be the recipient of a miracle? And that miracle, again, can take many different forms. So I think we have a long way to go, but I certainly know that among those people in the healthcare field and the therapists and the nurses and the doctors, those that were able to stand in my shoes, who spoke to me, not like a child, but who spoke to me the way they would want someone to speak to their wife or their daughter or their sister. Those were the people I gravitated to. And while on the surgical table, yes, I would absolutely take the guy with the really great hands who needed to buy a personality on eBay. I would take the great hands any day over that. But the people that I wanted to talk to and hear the stories from, the people that knew how to negotiate with my psyche in the world of hope, were the people that I felt connected to. And I have to say that in this world, in this sector of the medical world, they are in abundance because some of the most incredible people choose to go into this field of medicine. And I think it's what makes so many of us families feel like we can pick ourselves up off the floor some days, because so many of you are such wonderful, incredible people who approach each room with a smile, even though you may not be feeling it on some of those days. I think it was about a year, maybe a little less than a year, before I finally let my breath out. I didn't still know where we were going. I didn't really know if Bob would be back at work, but I knew that we were moving in sort of the right direction. I'm on the road now, so if I look utterly exhausted, it's because I am. I'm on the road with my novel, Those We Love Most, which I think is in the corner as well, which is a book about a bad thing that happens initially, and I'll just tell you straight up, the child who's hit by the car dies. And I tell you that because you never really meet him, and it happens in the beginning of the book. But it becomes the catalyst for the thing that we all know, which is looking at families and resilience. I'm fascinated by resilience. I'm fascinated at the way we are built as human beings. We can survive so many things that if you just looked at it in the abstract, you'd think, I could never do that. I mean, caregivers, how many times has someone said to you, I can't believe you did all that. How could you possibly have done that? And that's kind of where you want to take out the Tommy gun sometimes and start shooting. Because you look at them and you think, well, really, what choice do I have, number one, as a parent? Just the other day, I was in the green room at CBS waiting to go on, and that actor, Mark Harmon, was there. And he sort of figured out who I was and said something about, oh, I love your husband. He said, I read your book. He said, boy, you know what? My hat goes off to you because you stayed. And I hear that so many times. Good for you, you stayed with him. And I am shocked by that each time. And I know that not all marriages make it, and I see many of them imploding in the young couples in the military. But I am still just gobsmacked by that comment, as if one thing would happen and I would walk out the door. And I know people do. I'm not naive, and I know people have all kinds of reasons. And if fissures already exist in a marriage, as they do in the novel, sometimes this cracks things wider open. And I get all of that. But it sort of shows the sense of isolation, I think, that traumatic brain injury and families who suffer from it and live with it have within their world. This sense of someone's been dramatically altered. You're still hanging in there, huh? Which doesn't really feel supportive and connective in so many ways. I think I'm going to end by just saying I think the biggest changes in my life are I don't really sweat the small stuff. As I left my house at 10 o'clock this morning to be here by 12:30, giving myself plenty of time, and then ground to a complete standstill not far down the road on 95. And I fingered the 3 cell phones of the organizers that I had here and thought, well, I'm going to wait this out for a little bit. And then I thought, God, I hate being late, because I really do. And then I thought, you know what? Who's going to better understand than the New Jersey Brain Injury Association if you're just simply stuck in traffic? And then I thought, you know what? These guys are going to so understand that if the traffic accident's really bad, they'll just flip me with another speaker and probably not even care. And 7 years ago, I would have been sweating through my jacket. I would have been sort of panicking, pounding the steering wheel. We know what problems are now. We know what serious is now. And I think when you look for the good thing that comes out of the bad thing, that ability to take the scale of life and feel like you can pretty much handle much of what life throws at you is one of the little good things that you get to look at from such a scary and awfully bad thing at times. So I'm going to stop talking. I have cards that I'll put out and be at the signing desk as well. So if I don't get a chance to talk to you, just go to my website. It's just leewoodruff.com. I write a blog about every 6 weeks on it. And there's a chance for you to contact me. And I answer everybody. I'm in a really brutal period. I started Monday with my 53rd birthday, and I'm ending this week by driving to Colgate University tomorrow with my husband to watch our very first 21-year-old baby graduate from college. So, yeah. So it's an emotional week, but a really good week. And I'm so, so thrilled that his dad will be there. So thank you for listening to me. Thank you. Thank you, that's nice. Thanks, guys. Thank you.